Hello, boring dreamers. Today we are trading the comfort of dry land for the chaos of artificial seas. We are traveling back to ancient Rome, specifically to the year 80 AD, to witness the most audacious, expensive, and frankly insane engineering stunt in human history. Imagine standing in the center of the Colosseum, the greatest arena ever built, expecting to see a lion fight a gladiator. But instead, you hear a roar that isn't a beast. It is the roar of millions of gallons of water rushing in to drown the very ground you are standing on. You are about to watch the Romans play God with the ocean. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, because if the drowning doesn't get you, the giant warships crashing into the grandstands might. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is. I love imagining these stories echoing around the globe while the rest of the world sleeps. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in the upper tier of the Flavian Amphitheater, freshly built and gleaming with white travertine marble under the Mediterranean sun. The air is thick with the scent of saffron perfume, sprayed to mask the smell of the unwashed masses, roasted garbanzo beans, and the collective sweat of 50,000 people. You are squeezed between a shouting plebeian and a stoic senator, all of you waiting for the inaugural games to begin. Rome is bored. You see, the Roman mob is the most difficult audience in history. They have seen everything. They have seen men fight tigers. They have seen armies clash. They have seen executions so elaborate they involved mythology and mechanical sets. Blood is cheap here. To impress this crowd, you can't just spill blood. You have to rewrite the laws of physics. The Emperor Titus knows this. He needs a spectacle so grand, so impossible, that it will cement his family's legacy forever. He looks down at the wooden floor of the arena, covered in golden sand. To you, it looks like a solid surface. But Titus knows it is a lid, and he is about to pop it. He raises his hand. A trumpet blasts. The crowd goes silent, expecting a trapdoor to open and a bear to emerge. But instead, they hear a rumble. It comes from deep underground, a vibration that shakes the stone benches beneath you. It sounds like a river in flood. Suddenly, water begins to pour into the arena. This isn't a trickle. It isn't a leak. It is a deluge. Water erupts from massive sluice gates hidden around the perimeter. It surges across the sand, turning the fighting floor into a swamp, and then into a lake. The crowd gasps. They stand up, craning their necks. Is this a mistake? Has an aqueduct burst? No, this is the naumachiae. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Romans loved naval battles, or naumachiae, almost more than gladiator fights, because they were rarer and vastly more expensive. Julius Caesar was the first to hold one, digging a massive artificial lake in the Campus Martis. But Titus is doing something crazier. He isn't digging a lake in a field. He is flooding a building. He is turning the architectural masterpiece of the empire into a swimming pool. As you watch the water rise, swallowing the podiums where the gladiators stood just moments ago, you realize the sheer arrogance of this moment. The Romans are effectively saying to the world, we control the land. We control the beasts. Now we control the water. But think about the logistics for a second. You are sitting in a stone bowl. Stone is heavy. Water is heavy. Putting water inside stone usually results in leaks, cracks, and structural failure. If this goes wrong, the water could undermine the foundations, bringing the entire Colosseum crashing down on top of you. Or it could leak into the basements, destroying the elaborate machinery stored there. You look at the emperor. He looks calm. He trusts his engineers. He trusts the concrete. But you, looking at the dark, swirling water rising toward the first row of seats, feel a distinct unease. you realize that you are witnessing a high-wire act of hydraulics. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The water used to flood the Colosseum wasn't just plain river water. It was likely brought in from the Aqua Claudia, one of Rome's most pristine aqueducts. So, while the plebeians outside might be drinking muddy water from the Tiber, the emperor is using millions of gallons of high-quality drinking water just to float some boats for an afternoon. It is a display of excess that makes modern billionaires look thrifty. The water level stabilizes. It is perhaps 5 to 7 feet deep, just enough to float a flat-bottomed ship, but deep enough to drown a man in armor. The arena is gone. In its place is a shimmering, artificial sea, reflecting the sun and the stunned faces of the crowd. Historians still argue whether the flooding of the Colosseum actually happened as described by the poet Martial. Some skeptics claim it was impossible, or that the texts were exaggerating a much smaller event. They argue the hypogeum, the underground tunnels, would have made it impossible to waterproof the basin. But archaeological evidence suggests that the hypogeum we see today was built later by Emperor Domitian. In 80 AD, under Titus, the floor may have been a simple floodable basin designed specifically for this moment. You lean forward, gripping the stone rail. The water is calm now, but it won't stay that way. You hear the creak of timber and the splash of oars. Ships are entering the building. Actual warships. The stage is set. The impossible has been achieved. But now, the butcher's bill must be paid. You shift your gaze from the swirling, rising water back to the imperial box, the pulviner, where Emperor Titus sits. To the modern eye, he might look like a man in a toga enjoying a show, but to you, standing in the year 80 AD, he is a figure of immense, desperate pressure. Titus has been emperor for only a year. In that short time, Mount Vesuvius has erupted, burying Pompeii, and a massive fire has gutted parts of Rome. The gods seem angry. The people are restless. Titus needs a win. He doesn't just need a spectacle. He needs a miracle. He needs to show that Rome is still favored by the heavens, that it can command the elements themselves. So he made a promise. a promise that sounded like madness to anyone who understands the properties of stone and gravity. He promised that he would bring the ocean to the city center. You watch him now, his face impassive as the water laps against the podium wall, just feet below the senator's toes. This is his gamble. If the water leaks, if the foundations crack, if the arena collapses, his reign is effectively over. He will be the laughingstock of the empire. But if it works, he becomes a god. This is a mainstream historical fact. The inaugural games of the Colosseum, commissioned by Titus, lasted for 100 days. It was an orgy of spending designed to buy the love of the populace. Over 9,000 animals were killed. But the naumachiae, the naval battle, was the crown jewel. It was technically illegal to hold a triumph for a civil war victory, but Titus could hold a mock battle that celebrated Roman naval superiority without offending political sensibilities. It was propaganda written in water. The crowd around you is in a frenzy. They are screaming, pointing at the water. You see a man next to you betting his sandals that the water will stop rising before it hits the service doors. He loses. The water keeps coming. It is a display of excess that is hard to comprehend. In a city where fresh water is a precious resource, brought in by aqueducts over miles of stone arches, pouring millions of gallons into a hole in the ground for a single afternoon of entertainment is the ultimate flex. It's like filling a swimming pool with champagne while your neighbors are thirsty. But think about the audacity of the promise itself. The Colosseum is an oval. It is not a natural lake shape. It is filled with trapdoors, elevators, and cages used for the beast hunts. All of that intricate machinery, the hypogeum, mechanics that lift lions into the arena, has to be either removed or waterproofed perfectly. Titus has essentially ordered his engineers to turn a Swiss watch into a fishbowl. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. To commemorate these games, Titus issued a famous bronze sestertius coin depicting the Colosseum. It shows the amphitheater in incredible detail, including the statues in the arches and the spectator capacity. But interestingly, some versions of the coin show the arena filled with lines that look like waves. Numismatists, coin experts, argue over whether this was a stylized representation of the seating or a direct nod to the flooded arena. If it is the water, it means the naval battle was so iconic it became the literal symbol of the building on the currency. The water is now several feet deep. You can smell it. It smells clean, mineral-rich, confirming the theory that it's aqueduct water, not Tiber sludge. The reflection of the velarium, the massive awning that shades the crowd, ripples on the surface. The arena has been transformed. It feels surreal, like a dream where the logic of the world has broken down. You are sitting in a theater, yet you are looking at a sea. But there is a catch to this promise. The water is heavy, extremely heavy. A cubic meter of water weighs a ton. If the arena is flooded to a depth of just 5 feet, you are looking at roughly 18,000 to 20,000 tons of extra weight pressing down on the foundations. The Colosseum is built on the site of Nero's artificial lake, part of his golden house, which was drained to build the arena. The ground is soft, marshy clay. By reflooding it, Titus is tempting fate. He is risking liquefaction, where the soil loses its strength and behaves like a liquid, potentially causing the massive stone walls to sink or tilt. You look at the stone piers supporting the seats. They seem solid, but you can feel a low-frequency vibration in the air. It's the sound of water rushing through the intake channels, a thrumming power that vibrates in your chest. Historians still argue regarding the location of this specific naval battle. While the poet Martial is very clear that it happened in the amphitheater, whatever you see here, stranger, was lately land. Some scholars have argued it was logistically impossible. They suggest Titus might have held the battle in a nearby expanse, the naumachiae Augusti, an artificial lake dug by Augustus, and simply said it was in the Colosseum for branding purposes. But recent archaeological work on the Colosseum is drains, suggests the plumbing was indeed massive enough to handle a flood. The consensus is shifting back to the idea that Titus really did pull off the impossible. The water level stops rising. The roar of the sluice gates is cut off, replaced by the slapping of waves against the arena walls. The promise has been kept. The dry, dusty killing floor is gone. In its place is a calm, deadly lagoon. Titus stands up. He raises his toga-clad arm. The crowd roars, a sound that rivals the thunder of the water. He has given them the impossible. He has turned stone into water. But as you look at the shimmering surface, you realize that the real miracle isn't the water itself. It's what is happening underneath it. You are standing on top of a machine that had to be designed, built, and sealed by men who didn't have pumps, plastic, or electricity. To understand how this didn't turn into a disaster, you have to go down. You have to leave the sunlight and the cheering crowd and descend into the dark, wet heart of the beast. You are about to explore the hydraulic nightmare that makes the magic trick possible. You leave the roaring applause of the Emperor's box and the shimmering surface of the artificial lake. You slip away from the sunlight, descending a series of narrow, damp stone stairs that wend deep into the bowels of the amphitheater. The air changes instantly. The smell of saffron and sweat is replaced by the smell of wet limestone, mold, and the metallic tang of ancient plumbing. The temperature drops 20 degrees. You are now standing in the hypogeum, or rather, the space where the hypogeum will one day be built. Right now, in 80 AD, it is a vast, cavernous basin, a dark void beneath the arena floor that serves as the engine room for the Emperor's magic trick. You are standing in the hydraulic nightmare below. To the modern mind, plumbing is hidden behind drywall. It is out of sight, out of mind. But here, the plumbing is the architecture. You are walking through a labyrinth of service corridors that ring the central elliptical basin. Above your head, massive timber beams support the temporary wooden floor, which has been removed for the naval battle. Around you, in the gloom, you see the true scale of the engineering challenge. Titus didn't just need to fill a pool. He needed to fill a pool the size of a football field, and he needed to do it fast enough that the crowd didn't get bored and start rioting. You walk along a slippery stone ledge. Below you, in the darkness, you hear the rush of water. It sounds like a subway train approaching. These are the intake channels. The Romans didn't use electric pumps. They didn't have diesel generators. They used the only power source available to them, gravity. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Colosseum was designed with a highly sophisticated system of drains and intake pipes built directly into its concrete foundation. Archaeological excavations have revealed 4 massive tunnels connected to the arena's central axis. While 2 were likely used for the gladiatorial parades, the other 2 were hydraulic conduits. They connected directly to the city's aqueduct system. By opening a series of massive sluice gates, the engineers could divert the high-pressure flow of the aqueduct straight into the arena basin. It wasn't a trickle. It was a fire hose the size of a subway tunnel. You approach one of these sluice gates. It is a formidable barrier of bronze and oak, held in place by heavy iron chains. A team of slaves stands ready at a capstan, a giant winch. When the signal comes, they push against the wooden bars, groaning with effort. The chains pull taut. The gate lifts. Whoosh! The sound is deafening. Millions of gallons of water, built up behind the gate, surge into the basin. You feel the spray on your face. It is cold and terrifyingly powerful. If you fell into that intake channel, you would be ground into paste against the arena walls in seconds. But getting the water in is only half the battle. You have to keep it there. You are standing inside a structure made of travertine and tufa blocks. Stone is porous. Joints leak. If this basin isn't watertight, the water will seep into the foundations, soften the clay soil, and destabilize the 50,000 tons of stone seating above you. The Colosseum would literally sink into the mud. You look closely at the walls of the basin. They aren't bare stone. They are coated in a reddish, gritty plaster. You run your hand over it. It feels rough, like sandpaper. This is opus signum. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The secret to Roman waterproofing wasn't just mortar. It was crushed pottery. Opus signum was a special mix of lime, sand, and crushed terracotta, broken tiles, pots, and bricks. The silica in the terracotta reacted with the lime to create a rudimentary waterproof seal. It was so effective that many Roman cisterns lined with this stuff are still holding water today, 2,000 years later. You are looking at the ancient equivalent of a pool liner, made from the recycling bin of a pottery factory. But there is an even deeper secret. As you peer into the gloom, you might spot the engineers nervously checking the floor. They are worried about the pressure. The water in the arena weighs roughly 40 million pounds. That kind of weight does strange things to the ground. It compresses the soil. To combat this, the foundations of the Colosseum are essentially a giant floating concrete raft, a ring of solid concrete 13 meters thick. It spreads the weight out like a snowshoe. Without this massive, invisible slab of concrete beneath your feet, the naval battle would be a very short event, ending in a structural collapse. Historians still argue regarding the speed of the filling process. How long did the crowd actually have to wait? Some older calculations suggested it would take days to fill the arena, making the intermission theory impossible. They argued the naval battles must have been separate events held days apart from the gladiator fights. However, newer hydraulic studies by engineers like Martin Crapper suggest that with all sluice gates open, the arena could fill to a navigable depth of 1.5 meters, 5 feet, in as little as 2 to 4 hours. This means the Romans could do the morning beast hunts, clear the floor, open the taps during the lunch break, and have a sea ready for the afternoon show. It was a quick change act on an industrial scale. You walk further into the dark tunnels. You see the drainage system. It is just as impressive as the intake. There are 40 bronze drain covers scattered around the perimeter. Right now, they are sealed tight with lead plugs. If one of those plugs blows under the pressure, the water will drain out prematurely, leaving the ships stranded in the mud and the emperor looking like a fool. The slaves monitoring the drains look terrified. They know the penalty for failure. If the water level drops, they die. They are watching the lead seals with the intensity of a bomb squad. The noise in the tunnels is overwhelming, the rushing water, the shouting overseers. You emerge from the damp, noisy tunnels of the hypogeum and step back out into the Roman sunlight, blinking against the glare. You have seen the plumbing that delivers the water to the arena, but you haven't yet grasped the true miracle. That water didn't just appear in the basement. It traveled. To understand how Titus filled the Colosseum, you have to look beyond the city walls, toward the purple haze of the distant Apennine Mountains. You are about to trace the lifeline of the empire. You are about to walk the path of the Aqua Claudia. Rome is a thirsty monster. It consumes over 200 million gallons of water every single day. To feed this beast, the Romans built a web of 11 major aqueducts that act as artificial arteries, pumping life from the springs of the countryside into the heart of the city. But for the naumachiae in the Colosseum, Titus couldn't just use any old pipe. He needed volume, and he needed pressure. He needed the heavy artillery of hydration. He turned to the Aqua Claudia. This is a mainstream historical fact. Completed by the Emperor Claudius in 52 AD, though started by the mad Caligula, the Aqua Claudia was considered the magnificent queen of all aqueducts. It stretched for 43 miles, 69 kilometers. Most of that journey was underground, but for the final stretch approaching Rome, it rose up on massive stone arches that towered 100 feet in the air. These arches were essential because water, unlike an army, cannot march uphill. It obeys only gravity. Imagine standing in the fields outside Rome. You see a line of stone giants marching toward the city, carrying a sealed stone channel on their shoulders. Inside that channel, water is rushing at a steady, calculated speed. The gradient is precise, often dropping only a few inches for every 100 feet of length. If the slope is too steep, the water rushes too fast and erodes the stone. If it's too shallow, the water stagnates. Roman surveyors used a tool called a chorobates, a 20-foot-long wooden bench with water levels, and plumb bobs. Achieve this insane precision over 40 miles of rugged terrain. You follow the arches as they enter the city at the Porta Maggiore. From there, the water is channeled into a castellum divisorium, a distribution tank. This is the switching yard. Usually, the water is split into 3 pipes, one for the public fountains, free water for the people, one for the public baths, paid, and one for the private villas of the rich, very paid. But today, the emperor has commanded a diversion. The engineers turn the massive bronze valves. The water that usually feeds the baths on the Celian hill is rerouted. It plunges down a specialized siphon or high-pressure spigus, roaring toward the valley floor where the Colosseum sits. The pressure buildup is immense. When it hits the Colosseum's intake pipes, it hits with the weight of 40 miles of gravity behind it. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The Roman water network was so vast that it suffered from a unique crime: water theft puncturing. Wealthy Romans would hire specialized plumbers to dig secret tunnels to the aqueducts or main pipes. They would puncture the lead or stone conduit and insert a small quill pipe to siphon off free water for their private gardens and fish ponds. It was estimated that nearly 40% of Rome's water was stolen before it ever reached the public fountains. To combat this, the water commissioner Frontinus had to create a dedicated police force just to patrol the aqueducts and look for illegal taps. Today, however, the theft is sanctioned by the emperor himself. He is stealing the people's water to give them a show. You stand near the Celian hill, watching the invisible force of the water rush through the subterranean channels toward the amphitheater. The ground vibrates slightly under your feet. It is a reminder that Rome's power isn't just in its legions. It's in its masonry. They have conquered nature. They have forced a mountain spring to march 40 miles and fight a naval battle in a city center. Historians still argue regarding the exact connection between the Aqua Claudia and the Colosseum. While the Claudia is the top contender due to its volume and elevation, some scholars argue that the Aqua Neroniana, a branch of the Claudia built by Nero, was the specific conduit used. Others suggest that Titus might have utilized the reservoir of the nearby Temple of Claudius as a holding tank to dump the water quickly rather than waiting for the aqueduct flow rate. If they used a reservoir dump, the filling speed would be terrifyingly fast, a literal flash flood released by a lever. The water reaches the arena. It gushes into the basin you explored earlier. But now comes the next engineering hurdle. You have the water. You have the hole. But a stone amphitheater is not a bathtub. It is full of cracks, joints. You stand in the center of the vast, empty basin of the Colosseum. The sun beats down on the white travertine stones, reflecting heat like a kiln. The wooden floor of the arena, the stage where gladiators usually fight, has been completely dismantled and removed. You are looking at the naked skeleton of the building, and your job is to make sure this skeleton can hold a swimming pool's worth of water without dissolving. You are surrounded by a small army of specialized workers. They aren't just masons. They are essentially land shipwrights. They are applying the same technology used to keep Roman galleys afloat to the interior of a building. You watch a worker mixing a thick, reddish-pink paste in a trough. This is the opus signinum we touched on earlier, but seeing it applied is a different beast. It isn't just painted on. It is troweled on in thick, heavy layers, particularly in the corners where the floor meets the wall. This is the danger zone. Water hates right angles. It loves to seep into joints. So the workers use the paste to create a fillet, a curved ramp of cement that eliminates the sharp corner, giving the water nowhere to trap itself and dig in. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Romans were masters of concrete, opus cementitium. Their secret ingredient was pozzolana, a volcanic ash found near Naples. When mixed with lime and seawater, or fresh water, it created a chemical reaction that grew stronger over time and crucially could set underwater. It was essentially the world's first hydraulic cement. Modern concrete tends to degrade after 50 to 100 years. Roman concrete structures like the Pantheon and the harbor at Caesarea are still standing 2,000 years later. Titus is betting his reputation on this volcanic chemistry. But cement can't move, and the Colosseum has moving parts. You walk over to the massive sluice gates and the drainage portals. These are mechanical openings. You can't cement them shut, or you can't drain the water later. They need to be watertight when closed, but movable when needed. Here, the technology shifts from masonry to naval engineering. You smell the sharp, acrid scent of hot pitch and tar. Workers are stuffing the gaps around the bronze gates with oakum loose hemp fibers soaked in pine tar. This is caulking. It's exactly what sailors do to the hulls of their ships. They are hammering the sticky, black rope into the crevices. When the water hits the oakum, the hemp fibers will swell, creating a pressure seal that becomes tighter the wetter it gets. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. For the most sensitive joints, the Romans didn't trust tar. They used molten lead. Lead was the duct tape of the Roman Empire. If there was a crack in the stone or a gap between a bronze pipe and a wall, they would pour molten lead directly into it. It cooled instantly, conforming perfectly to the irregular shape of the stone. It was a permanent, heavy-duty gasket. Of course, the workers breathing in lead fumes all day probably didn't live long, but the emperor's pool didn't leak. You check the floor of the basin. It isn't smooth. It is dotted with strange, raised blocks of stone and sockets. These are the footings for the wooden posts that usually hold up the arena floor. This brings us to a major scholarly debate: the removable support theory. For years, historians were baffled. If the hypogeum, the underground, was flooded, how did they protect the hundreds of timber posts that held up the sand floor? Wood rots if you soak it repeatedly. Engineer Martin Crapper and others have proposed that the supports weren't permanent. They argue that the wooden posts were designed to be dismantled and removed before the flood. The sockets you see in the floor are likely lined with bronze or lead to protect them during the naval battle. It suggests that the Colosseum was the world's largest piece of IKEA furniture capable of being taken apart and put back together in a completely different configuration within hours. The workers finish the final seal. The pitch is cooling. The cement is setting. The basin is now a single, continuous, waterproof cup. You climb out of the pit, ascending the service stairs to the podium level. You look down. The gray stone and pink cement look ugly and industrial in the harsh light. It looks like an empty reservoir, but Titus signals the aqueduct engineers. The command is given. The bronze gates you inspected earlier groan. The chains pull taut, and then the roar begins. Water crashes into the basin. It swirls over the opus signinum, testing every joint, every seal, every inch of oakum. You hold your breath. You watch the water line rise past the first layer of stone blocks. No bubbles. No sudden whirlpools indicating a leak. It holds. The water continues to rise, burying the sockets and the cement fillets. The ugly industrial pit disappears, replaced by a dancing turquoise surface. The Colosseum is dead. Long live the ocean. But a lake is boring without boats. And you can't just sail a normal ship into an arena. The water is only 5 to 7 feet deep. A standard Roman trireme needs a much deeper draft. If they try to bring a real warship in here, it will run aground instantly, and the naval battle will become a naval sitting awkwardly dash and dash the dash mud. You need special ships. You need flat-bottomed monsters designed for a puddle. You are about to witness the arrival of the arena fleet, vessels that look terrifying from the top, but are essentially rafts on the bottom. You stand on the tiered stone seating of the Colosseum, gripping the edge of the railing as the roar of the incoming water begins to fade. The sluice gates have been shut. The violent, rushing torrent that burst from the tunnels moments ago has settled into a rhythmic, sloshing chop. The dust that usually hangs over the arena, the pulverized sand and dried blood of the morning's beast, hunts has been washed from the air, replaced by a strange, humid freshness. You take a deep breath. It smells like a riverbank in the middle of a stone city. You look down. The arena floor is gone. The complex network of trapdoors, the elevators that lift tigers into the sunlight, the golden sand, all of it has vanished beneath a sheet of opaque, turquoise water. The transformation is absolute. The Colosseum has ceased to be a theater of earth and has become a theater of fluid. The water laps against the podium wall, just a few vertical feet below the toes of the senators in the front row. If you were one of them, you might be pulling your feet back, nervously eyeing the waterline. The psychological impact is profound. You are used to seeing solid ground down there. To see it replaced by a shimmering, restless surface makes the massive stone walls around you feel precarious, as if the whole building has been unmoored from the earth and is drifting out to sea. This is a mainstream historical fact. The depth of the naumachiae water was carefully calculated. It wasn't a deep ocean. It was a tactical puddle. The crowd is entranced. You see plebeians leaning precariously over the upper rails, pointing at their own reflections in the artificial lake below. The acoustics of the arena have changed. The water acts as a soundboard. The murmur of the crowd bounces off the surface, creating a strange, amplified echo that rings through the travertine arches. It feels chaotic, vibrant, and incredibly dangerous. But look closely at the surface. The water isn't perfectly still. It ripples and swirls. This isn't just because of the filling process. It's because the arena is breathing. Here's a quirky, fringe tidbit. The water in the Colosseum wasn't just a stagnant pool. It was likely chemically treated, or at least aesthetically enhanced. The Romans were obsessed with presentation. We know that during regular games, saffron-infused mist, sparchones, was sprayed over the crowd to mask the smell of blood and sweat. For the naval battles, there is speculation that they might have dyed the water. Blue dyes from woad or green mineral powders could have been added to the intake flow to make the water look like the deep ocean, rather than the clear, shallow pool it actually was. Imagine the surreal horror of seeing a bright, electric blue sea trapped inside a white stone bowl. You watch as a piece of debris, a splinter of wood from the intake gates, floats lazily across the center of the arena. It highlights the sheer scale of the space. The elliptical basin is roughly 87 meters long and 55 meters wide. It is huge. It is a canvas waiting for paint. But there is a group of people watching this who are not impressed by the magic trick. You look up, way up, to the highest rim of the Colosseum walls. There, balancing on the narrow stone walkways, are the sailors of the Misenum fleet. These men are not spectators. They are the stagehands of the sky. They operate the velarium, the massive canvas awning that shades the crowd from the sun. They are actual salt-crusted sailors, drafted into service to pull the miles of ropes that unfurl the giant tent. You could imagine their cynicism. They spend their lives battling the real Mediterranean, facing 30-foot waves and storms. Now, they are looking down at a 5-foot puddle in a bucket, watching landlubbers gasp at the sea. To them, this isn't a miracle. It's a toy. Historians still argue regarding the frequency of these floods. Was this a regular Tuesday event? Or was it a once-in-a-lifetime stunt? The traditional view, supported by the poet Martial, is that the naval battles were the highlight of the inaugural games in 80 AD. However, archaeological evidence suggests that Emperor Domitian, Titus's brother and successor, later built permanent masonry walls inside the hypogeum that would have made flooding impossible. This suggests that the naumachiae in the Colosseum was a very short-lived phenomenon, perhaps occurring only for a few years before the underground was remodeled for more complex beast hunts. You are likely witnessing a limited edition event. If you miss this show, you miss it forever. The sun moves across the sky, casting long shadows across the water. The shimmering blue or dyed surface is beautiful, but it is also empty. A lake without ships is just a swimming pool. The crowd begins to get restless. They didn't come to look at water. They came to see death. Titus senses the mood. He gestures to the massive arched gates at the ends of the arena's long axis. These are the Porta Libitinaria, Gate of Death, and the Porta Triumphalis. Usually, these gates admit gladiators marching to their doom, or the bodies being dragged out. Today, they are dry docks. You hear the groan of heavy timber. You hear the rhythmic pounding of a drum. Boom, boom, boom. The gates open, and the nose of a ship appears. It isn't a toy boat. It isn't a model. It is a warship. It has a bronze ram. It has a bank of oars. It has a deck packed with armed men. But there is something odd about it. It moves with a strange, gliding smoothness, sitting high in the water. It enters the arena, followed by another and another. You are about to witness the arrival of the Puddle Fleet. These are ships designed to fight a war in 5 feet of water. They are feats of engineering in their own right, built to mimic the great triremes of the Roman Navy while obeying the strict laws of the shallow arena floor. You lean over the stone balustrade, eyes fixed on the dark, gaping maw of the Porta Libitinaria. The rhythmic booming of the drum grows louder, echoing off the water and the stone walls. And then it emerges. A ship, but not just any ship. This is a warship. It has a high, curving stern post painted in brilliant vermilion. It has a bronze ram at the prow, shaped like the head of a boar or a wolf, designed to smash through enemy hulls. It has banks of oars churning the water into white foam. The crowd erupts. To them, this is the might of Rome made manifest. It is a terrifying vessel of war. But you, looking closely from your vantage point, notice something strange. The ship moves oddly. It doesn't cut through the water with the deep, heavy momentum of a deep-sea vessel. It skims. It slides sideways a little too easily when the wind catches the sails. You are looking at a masterpiece of deceptive engineering. You are looking at a flat-bottomed illusion. This is a mainstream historical fact. A standard Roman warship, like a trireme or a quinquereme, has a deep draft. It needs a heavy keel to provide stability and prevent it from capsizing in the rough Mediterranean swells. So, the Roman engineers had to reinvent the boat. They essentially built massive, combat-ready rafts. They removed the deep keels and flattened the hulls, creating a design similar to the river barges used on the Tiber, but dressed up in the costume of an ocean-going predator. These ships are top-heavy and unstable. If they turn too sharply, they risk tipping over. The captains steering these things are fighting a constant battle against physics, trying to maneuver a clumsy, shallow-draft box as if it were a sleek killing machine. You watch as the first ship enters the center of the arena. The oarsmen are taking short, choppy strokes. Why? Because if they dip the oars too deep, the blades will hit the concrete floor of the basin. Clack, clack. You can hear the occasional wooden scrape of a blade striking the bottom. It is a puddle fleet, operating with a margin of error measured in inches. But the most staggering part of this spectacle isn't the engineering. It is the waste. You look at the fresh timber of the hull. You smell the pine tar and the paint. These ships are brand new. They were likely built in the naval yards at Misenum or Ostia, specifically for this event. And here is the kicker. They are single-use items. In the modern world, we complain about single-use plastic straws. The Romans built entire fleets of warships, consuming acres of forest, tons of bronze, and thousands of man-hours just to smash them to pieces in a single afternoon. There is no dry dock waiting for these vessels. They will not be repaired. They are disposable naval architecture. It is an orgy of consumption that screams, we have so many resources, we can literally throw ships away. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. The visual scale of these ships is a matter of intense debate. To make the arena look bigger, the Romans might have used forced perspective engineering. Some historians suggest that the ships were slightly scaled down perhaps, 3/4 size to make the Colosseum look vast like an ocean. It's the same trick used at Disney World. Or they might have used biremes, ships with 2 banks of oars, but painted fake oar ports on the side to make them look like massive quinqueremes, 5 banks. You are watching a special effects blockbuster where the props are deadly real, but the scale is a lie. The second ship enters from the opposite gate. It is painted blue, representing the Athenian fleet. The Romans loved reenacting historical battles, usually Greeks versus Persians. The first ship is red, representing the Persians. The narrative has been set. The stage is crowded. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the maneuverability problem. Skeptics of the Colosseum naumachiae argue that the arena floor, approx 87 meters by 55 meters, was simply too small for 2 warships to maneuver, let alone a fleet. A trireme is about 37 meters long. 2 of them end-to-end would fill the length of the arena. How could they ram each other? How could they circle? Supporters of the theory argue that they didn't need to circle. This wasn't a tactical regatta. It was a demolition derby. The ships simply entered, rode straight at each other, and smashed. It was brutal, close-quarters slugging. They also suggest that the fleets might have consisted of only 2 or 3 large ships per side, surrounded by a swarm of smaller skiffs and boarding rafts. It wasn't the Battle of Salamis. It was a knife fight in a bathtub. You watch the ships drifting into position. The water sloshes against the arena walls. The crews are shouting commands. But who are these crews? You look closely at the men on the deck. They are wearing armor, holding swords and spears. They look like soldiers, but look at the men on the rowing benches. Look at the men chained to the oars. They aren't professional sailors. They aren't volunteers. They are damnati. You are about to shift your perspective. You are no longer the spectator in the stands. You are about to zoom in on the man sitting on the lowest bench of the Persian ship. He is sweating. He is terrified. He is chained to a piece of wood in a sinking ship, in a fake ocean, surrounded by 50,000 people screaming for his death. You are about to experience the naumachiae from the rower's perspective. And you are about to learn that in this battle, the only way out is to drown. You are no longer looking down from the safety of the stone bleachers. The smell of saffron and the warm sun are gone, replaced by the reek of unwashed bodies, bilge water, and paralyzing fear. You are sitting on a rough wooden bench, deep in the belly of the Persian ship. Your wrists are chafed raw by iron manacles. A heavy chain runs through the loop on your shackles, connecting you to the man on your left and the man on your right. You are not a soldier. You are not a sailor. You are damnati. You are a man condemned to death. Maybe you are a prisoner of war from Judea, dragged back to Rome after the destruction of the temple. Maybe you are a criminal convicted of arson. It doesn't matter now. The Roman legal system has sentenced you to damnati ad mortem death by public execution. But the emperor is merciful. He isn't going to just strangle you in a cell. He is going to let you die with a sword in your hand, entertaining his people. You look at the man next to you. He is shivering, muttering a prayer in a language you don't understand. The overseer walks down the center aisle of the ship, cracking a whip. "Row," he screams. You pull on the heavy oar. It feels clumsy. Remember, this is a flat-bottomed barge disguised as a warship. It doesn't slice through the water. It lumbers. Every stroke sends a vibration up your arms. You can hear the clack-clack of the oars hitting the shallow concrete bottom of the arena if you dip too deep. You are trapped in a wooden box, floating in a stone box. This is a mainstream historical fact. The combatants in a naumachiae were not gladiators. Gladiators were expensive, highly trained professionals, the sports stars of the ancient world. You don't waste a gladiator by drowning him in a chaotic free-for-all. Instead, the Romans used prisoners of war and criminals. For the largest naumachiae, held by Claudius on Fucine Lake, ancient texts claim 19,000 men were forced to fight. It was an army of the dead. These men knew there was no prize for winning. The only prize was dying a few minutes later than the guy next to you. The ship lurches. You are moving into position. Through the oarport, you catch a glimpse of the emperor in his box. He looks like a tiny, white-clad doll from this distance. And this brings us to the most famous line in Roman history. You have seen it in every movie. You think every gladiator says it. But actually, you are the only one who gets to say it. As the ships drift past the imperial box, the shouting dies down. Thousands of men raise their weapons toward Titus or Claudius in the original context and roar, "Avenue Imperator morituri te salutant." Hail, Emperor! Those who are about to die salute you. Here's a quirky, fringe tidbit. This iconic phrase is recorded in only one ancient text, Suetonius, and it was spoken specifically by the rowers at a naval battle, not by gladiators in the Colosseum. And the best part? It backfired. When the prisoners shouted, "Hail! Those who are about to die," the Emperor Claudius reportedly muttered back, "Or not. Aut non." The prisoners interpreted this joke as a pardon. They all stopped rowing. They cheered. They refused to fight. The emperor had to waddle down to the water's edge, shouting and threatening to burn them all alive, just to get the battle started again. It was a rare moment of comedy and a grim spectacle. But Titus is not Claudius. He does not joke. He waves his hand. The games begin. You feel the ship accelerate. The drumbeat tempo increases. Boom, boom, boom. You are rowing straight toward the Athenian ship. You are not steering. You are the engine. You are blind to the battlefield, seeing only the sweaty back of the man in front of you. But you can hear it. You hear the enemy drum. You hear the splash of their oars. You realize the terrifying reality of your position. You are the crumple zone. If the enemy ship rams yours, the bronze beak will smash through the hull right where you are sitting. You are the armor. And you are chained to the bench. If the ship sinks, you go down with it. There is no swimming to safety. Historians still argue regarding the script of these battles. Were they choreographed reenactments where the Greeks had to win because history said so? Or were they genuine, unscripted bloodbaths? Most scholars believe it was a mix. The ships were set up to mimic a historical scenario. For example, Persians versus Athenians. But once the metal clashed, it was chaos. The prisoners were fighting for their lives. If they fought bravely enough, the crowd might grant them a reprieve. The outcome wasn't fixed, but the odds were definitely stacked. The drum stops. The overseer screams, "Brace!" Crunch. The world turns sideways. Wood splinters. The entire ship shudders as if it hit a wall. You are thrown forward, your face smashing into the back of the rower ahead of you. Water-cold, dye-blue water rushes in around your ankles. The enemy ship has rammed you. But they didn't hit you hard enough to sink you. The water is too shallow for a dramatic Titanic moment. Instead, the ships are locked together. The ram is stuck in your hull. And now, the grappling hooks fly. You hear the thud of iron hooks biting into the deck above your head. The naval battle has stopped being about sailing. It has become a land battle on floating platforms. The soldiers on the deck above draw their swords. They are boarding. But you are still chained below. The water is rising past your knees. The hull is leaking. You struggle against the manacles, panic rising in your throat. You are about to drown in 5 feet of water in the middle of a city, while 50,000 people cheer for the guys upstairs. But the battle isn't staying upstairs. The fighting is spilling down into the rowing decks. The enemy soldiers are coming down the hatch. You are about to engage in close-quarters combat in a sinking wooden box. You have no sword. You have only your heavy oar and the desperate, feral rage of a man who refuses to die quietly. The wooden hatch above your head explodes inward. Splinters rain down on your shoulders like sharp confetti. A body falls through the opening, a soldier in heavy leather armor, clutching a gladius. He lands in the rising water between the rowing benches, struggling to find his footing on the slick, algae-covered deck. He isn't the rescue party. He is the boarding party. The battle has descended into the hull. You are no longer rowing. You are fighting for your life in a space the size of a walk-in closet, filled with 50 screaming men and 3 feet of water. You can't retreat. The heavy iron chain connecting your wrist to the bench sees to that. You can't dodge. You can only lash out. You grab the handle of your heavy oar, the only weapon you have, and swing it like a club. It connects with the soldier's helmet with a sickening thud. This is the chaos of close-quarters combat in a naumachiae. It isn't the clean, heroic dueling of the gladiator arena, where two men circle each other on the sand. This is a meat grinder. It is a frantic, claustrophobic scramble where drowning is just as likely as being stabbed. The water around your waist is churning, foaming, and slowly changing color. The dye the engineers added to the water, that beautiful, electric Mediterranean blue, is mixing with the blood spilling from the decks above. It swirls into a lurid, metallic purple. This is a mainstream historical fact. Roman naval warfare was unique because the Romans essentially refused to fight like sailors. They hated the sea. They weren't great navigators. So, they engineered a way to turn naval battles into land battles. They invented the corvus during the Punic Wars, a massive boarding bridge with a spike on the end. They would slam it onto the enemy ship, locking the two vessels together, and then march their heavy infantry across. In the Colosseum, this tactic is taken to the extreme. The ships aren't just passing each other. They are lashed together with grappling hooks, forming a floating, unstable platform for a massive infantry brawl. You are caught in the crush. A spear point thrusts through the oar port, missing your ear by an inch. You yank on your chain, desperate to break the wood of the bench. The ship is listing heavily to the port side. The water is chest deep now. The man next to you has stopped screaming. He is slumped over his oar, an arrow protruding from his chest. You realize that the real danger isn't the soldier in front of you. It's the ship itself. It is dying. The timber frame is groaning under the stress of the collision and the weight of the water. If it rolls over, you will be dragged down with it, trapped by your shackles. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The acoustics of a naval battle inside a stone amphitheater created a sensory experience unlike anything else in the ancient world. Sound waves travel well over water. The screams of the dying, the clash of steel, and the splintering of wood bounced off the water, hit the stone walls of the Colosseum, and amplified. It created a cauldron of noise. Roman writers described the sound as being so deafening that the spectators could hear the trumpets signaling the end of the round. You are fighting inside a drum that is being beaten by giants. Suddenly, the bench you are chained to gives way. The wood, rotten from the rapid construction or shattered by the impact, snaps. You are free. Well, you are still wearing handcuffs, but you are no longer attached to the sinking ship. You scramble upward, clambering over the bodies of the fallen, gasping for air as you pull yourself through the shattered hatch and onto the main deck. The sun hits your face. The fresh air fills your lungs. But the scene on deck is a nightmare. Ships are burning. Men are being pushed over the rails. Arrows rain down from the rigging like hail. You jump. You hit the water. It is cold and shockingly shallow. Your feet touch the concrete bottom of the arena. You stand up, water lapping at your chin. You are alive. You are out of the ship. You look around. The water is filled with debris oars, shields, helmets, and men thrashing in the dyed surf. Historians still argue regarding the survivor policy of these events. In a normal gladiator match, if you fought well, the crowd might wave their handkerchiefs, missio, and spare your life. But in a naumachiae, with thousands of combatants, individual mercy was logistically impossible. Did the winners get a pardon? Or was it a last man standing scenario where the surviving team was simply executed afterward to clear the stage? Some accounts suggest that if the battle was spectacular enough, the emperor might pardon the entire surviving fleet. You cling to that hope. You just have to survive until the trumpet sounds. You wade through the carnage, pushing aside a floating shield. You are looking for a safe spot, maybe a piece of wreckage to cling to, or the edge of the arena wall. But as you move through the murky, purple water, you notice something. The men around you aren't just dying from wounds. They are screaming and disappearing. They are being pulled under. You think it's the weight of their armor. You think it's the undertow. But then you see a ripple in the water. A wake. Something is moving through the flooded arena. Something that shouldn't be here. Titus didn't just fill the arena with water and ships. He wanted to recreate the Nile. He wanted to recreate the danger of the wild. And what is a river without its monsters? You freeze. You see a pair of eyes break the surface. Cold, reptilian, yellow eyes, then a snout. You are about to learn that the Emperor has added a biological hazard to the mix. You survived the ramming. You survived the boarding party. But can you survive the apex predator of the ancient world? You freeze, the water lapping against your chest, the sounds of the dying battle fading into a dull roar in your ears. Your eyes are locked on the wake cutting through the purple-dyed surf. It isn't a swimmer. It moves with a serpentine, predatory efficiency that no human can mimic. The object submerges, disappearing into the murky depths. You spin around, panic rising in your throat, searching for the shadow beneath the surface. Then a snout breaks the water 10 feet away. It exhales with a sharp hiss. You are staring at a Nile crocodile. Shutterstock, it is massive, perhaps 12 feet of armored scales and teeth, transported all the way from Egypt to this stone bowl in Rome. It looks out of place, surreal, like a dinosaur dropped into a swimming pool. But its aggression is very real. It snaps its jaws, a sound like two stones cracking together, and lunges at a thrashing sailor nearby. The water erupts in a violent splash. The sailor screams, then vanishes. You realize with a sickening jolt that Emperor Titus wasn't content with just a naval battle. He wanted a venatio, a beast hunt mixed in with his war. He wanted to recreate the ecosystems of the empire. He turned the Colosseum into a lethal aquarium. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Roman poet Martial, who witnessed these inaugural games, explicitly describes monsters of the deep swimming amidst the ships. He writes about a sea bull, possibly a hippo or a seal, and other aquatic beasts participating in the chaos. The Romans were obsessed with the Nile. To them, the river represented the ultimate exotic danger. By filling the arena with crocodiles and hippopotamuses, Titus was essentially bringing the most dangerous river in the world to the doorstep of the Roman mob. It was a flex of logistical dominance. I can conquer the people of Egypt, and I can kidnap their gods. You scramble backward, wading clumsily through the water, tripping over sunken debris. The crocodile isn't alone. You see another ripple, then another. There is a pod of them. They are confused, terrified by the noise, and aggressive. They are snapping at anything that moves: oars, debris, men. You climb onto a piece of floating wreckage, shattered hull section from the rammed ship. You pull your legs out of the water just as a set of jaws snaps shut on the wood where your ankle was a second ago. You are stranded on a raft, surrounded by prehistoric killers, watching your fellow prisoners get picked off one by one. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The logistics of getting a live crocodile from the Nile to Rome were insane. They had to be trapped, bound, kept wet, and fed during a voyage of thousands of miles across the Mediterranean. But the Romans didn't stop at crocodiles. Later emperors tried to top Titus. The emperor Elagabalus allegedly flooded the arena with wine instead of water, and released poisonous snakes into it. He wanted to see a purple sea of death. Compared to that, Titus's crocodiles seem almost sensible. But for you, clinging to a wet plank, the distinction is academic. You watch as archers on the arena wall take aim. They aren't shooting at you. They are shooting at the crocodiles. This is the second phase of the show. The naval battle is over. The beast hunt has begun. The surviving prisoners are now just bait. You see an arrow strike a crocodile in the soft skin of its neck. It thrashes, whipping its tail, sending a spray of bloody water into the air. This is the chaos of the naumachiae. It is a layered spectacle. War, then nature, then hunting. It is designed to overwhelm the senses of the audience. They are screaming in delight, betting on whether the man or the beast will win. Historians still argue regarding the safety measures for the crowd during these aquatic hunts. A crocodile can move surprisingly fast on land. What stopped them from climbing out of the shallow basin and eating a senator in the front row? Some scholars suggest there was a system of nets and rotating ivory rollers on the top of the podium wall that prevented animals from getting a grip. Others argue that the water level was kept low enough that the vertical drop was an insurmountable barrier. But looking at the chaos below, you wonder if the safety protocols were as robust as the historians hope. You balance on your raft, shivering. The sun is dipping lower. The water is cooling. The crocodiles, being cold-blooded, are starting to become sluggish. They retreat to the edges of the arena, seeking the warmth of the stone walls. The slaughter slows down. The trumpet sounds again, a long, mournful blast. The games are over. You have survived the ramming. You have survived the drowning. You have survived the crocodile. You look around at the handful of other survivors' men clinging to ropes, sitting on overturned hulls, or standing chest deep in the water, too exhausted to move. You wait for the execution order. You wait for the archers to turn their mouths on you. But the arrows don't come. Instead, you hear a new sound, a deep, mechanical gurgling. It comes from beneath you. The water level is dropping. Titus has signaled the end of the show. He needs the arena back. He needs it dry for tomorrow's gladiator fights, and he can't wait for evaporation. You are standing on the slick, algae-coated concrete floor of the arena, the water swirling around your waist, then your knees, then your ankles. The roar of the naval battle has been replaced by a new, equally terrifying sound. The deep, resonant gurgle of a drain, the size of a city block. The puddle fleet is grounded. The mighty warships that, just moments ago, were ramming each other with the force of leviathans are now listing precariously to the side, their flat bottoms grinding against the stone with a mournful screech. The crocodiles are beaching themselves, hissing and snapping at the retreating tide, confused by the sudden disappearance of their habitat. You have survived the flood. Now, you are surviving the flush. Titus has pulled the plug. To you, it feels like magic. To the engineers working frantically in the hypogeum below, it is a calculated release of potential energy. Remember those 40 bronze drain covers you saw in the tunnels earlier? The ones sealed with lead? The slaves have just hammered the pins out. They have opened the valves, and gravity's doing the rest. The water isn't just flowing out. It is being sucked out with violent force. Millions of gallons are rushing into the massive subterranean sewers that ring the foundation. You have to be careful where you step. If you get too close to one of the drainage grates, the suction is strong enough to pin your leg against the bars, trapping you there until you drown or the water runs out. You watch a piece of a shattered shield spin in a whirlpool and vanish into the dark underworld. This is a mainstream historical fact. The drainage system of the Colosseum was a marvel of hydraulic engineering, arguably even more impressive than the intake system. It connected directly to the Cloaca Maxima, the greatest sewer, which was the main artery of Rome's waste management system. The Colosseum's drains were massive, lined with brick and concrete, designed to handle the runoff of torrential storms. By tapping into this existing infrastructure, Titus could empty the arena in a fraction of the time it took to fill it. It was the world's largest toilet flush, discharging blood, dye, and crocodile poop directly into the Tiber River. As the water level drops to mere inches, the true carnage of the battle is revealed. When the water was high and dyed purple, it hid the bodies. Now, they are strewn across the basin like driftwood. You see men tangled in ropes, pinned under hulls, or simply lying in the mud. The glamour of the spectacle is gone. All that remains is a wet, smelly, industrial pit filled with trash. You trudge toward the service stairs, your boots squelching in the silt. The smell is pungent, a mix of swamp water, copper, blood, and the wet wood of the ships. But as you look at the drains, you realize they are carrying away more than just water. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. When archaeologists excavated the drains of the Colosseum in the 19th and 20th centuries, they didn't just find mud. They found the lost and found of the Roman Empire. They discovered fruit seeds, figs, grapes, melons, that spectators had spat out during the show. They found animal bones, bears, lions, ostriches. They found coins lost by gamblers. But most bizarrely, they found items that suggest the naumachiae wasn't the only event happening. They found hairpins, jewelry, and even evidence of cook fires. The drains were a time capsule of Roman snacking habits. You are wading through a slurry that contains the emperor's war, the gladiators' blood, and the senator's lunch. The last of the water disappears with a final sucking gasp. The arena is empty. It is a vast, gray, dripping cavern. The ships look ridiculous, now clumsy wooden boxes stranded on dry land. The illusion is shattered. The sea has evaporated, leaving behind a mess that would make a modern janitor quit on the spot. But the work isn't done. In fact, for the stagehands, the real nightmare is just beginning. Look at the sun. It is late afternoon. Tomorrow morning at dawn, the beast hunts are scheduled to resume. The crowd expects to see lions hunting antelopes on a sandy desert plain. They do not want to see a muddy, wet concrete floor littered with shipwrecks. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate: the turnaround time. How fast could the Romans really switch from sea to land? The poet Martial implies it happened rapidly, almost miraculously. In a moment you will say, here was lately the sea. But modern engineers are skeptical. Even with the drains wide open, the floor would be slick with mud and slime. Wood takes time to dry. How did they prevent the gladiators from slipping and falling the next day? Some historians argue that they didn't dry it. They covered it. They suggest the Romans laid down a fresh wooden floor over the wet concrete, or perhaps dumped tons of dry sand directly onto the mud to soak up the moisture. Others argue that the naval battles were held only at the end of a festival, so they had weeks to clean up. But the schedule of the inaugural games suggests a tight rotation. If the quick turnaround theory is true, it means thousands of slaves are about to swarm this basin, scrubbing, disassembling ships, and hauling sand in a frenzy of nocturnal labor that rivals the building of the pyramids. You climb out of the basin, shivering in your wet clothes. You have survived the battle. You have survived the flush. You are standing on the podium level again, looking down at the empty shell. It feels cold. The energy of the crowd has dissipated. The magic trick is over, and now you can see the wires. But as you wring out your tunic, you notice a group of men entering the arena. They aren't soldiers. They are carpenters. They are carrying hammers, saws, and ropes. They aren't here to clean. They are here to deconstruct. The ships have to go. You can't drag them out whole. The gates are too narrow for a turning radius. They have to be broken down. You watch as they attack the beautiful, expensive warships with axes. Crack, splinter. They are destroying the fleet. It is the ultimate confirmation of Roman excess. These ships were built to die. They served their purpose for 3 hours, and now they are firewood. You feel a strange sense of melancholy. The sheer waste of it. The brilliance of the engineering, the lives of the prisoners, the wood from the forests, all burned on the altar of boredom. Rome demands novelty, and novelty is expensive. But you can't linger on the philosophy. You need to get out of the way, because the sand is coming. You hear the rumble of carts. The arena, from the Latin arena, meaning sand, you are standing on the high podium of the Flavian amphitheater once again, but time has moved forward. The roar of the water and the splash of oars are distant memories, fading into the mythology of the city. The Emperor Titus, the man who commanded the ocean, is dead, succumbed to a fever after only 2 years on the throne. Now his younger brother, Domitian, wears the purple, and Domitian looks down at the empty, expansive basin of the arena, not with a sense of wonder, but with a gaze of cold architectural calculation. He does not see a lake. He sees wasted space. You watch as a new army of workers descends into the pit. They are not carrying pitch or oakum to seal the floor. They are carrying bricks, thousands and thousands of bricks. They aren't waterproofing the basin. They are colonizing it. You are witnessing the end of an era. You are watching the construction of the permanent hypogeum. This is the moment the Colosseum stops being a magic trick and starts being a machine. Domitian has decided that while naval battles are spectacular, they are logistically nightmarish and, frankly, limited. A boat can only do so much, but a tiger that pops out of the ground? A forest that appears from nowhere? That is a show you can run every single day. To achieve this, he orders the basin to be filled not with water, but with walls. You watch the masons laying the foundations. They build a complex labyrinth of brick and stone walls directly onto the waterproof concrete floor you saw earlier. These walls rise up, dividing the vast open space into a series of narrow corridors, cages, and service tunnels. It looks like a honeycomb made of masonry. This is a mainstream historical fact. The hypogeum, literally underground, that we see today in the ruins of the Colosseum was largely the work of Domitian. He realized that the floodable floor was a one-trick pony. By installing permanent walls, he made flooding impossible. You can't fill a maze with water and sail ships through it, but he gained the ability to stage the most complex theatrical productions in history. He traded the horizontal spectacle of the sea for the vertical spectacle of the surprise attack. As the walls rise, you see the carpenters installing the new technology. This is the hardware that will replace the ships. They install vertical tracks made of sturdy oak. They install capstans' massive wooden spools that can be turned by teams of men. They install counterweights. You are looking at the birth of the elevator. The Colosseum is being fitted with 28 distinct lifts. These aren't for people. They are for beasts. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. The elevators of the Colosseum were a masterpiece of ergonomic cruelty. The cages were designed so that the animal would walk in at the bottom level. The door would lock. Then, 8 slaves would push a massive rotary winch. The cage would rise up a vertical shaft. When it reached the top, a lid in the arena floor would open automatically, and a ramp would drop. The animal, terrified by the dark ride and the sudden light, would bolt out into the arena, appearing as if by magic. But here is the kicker. The slaves operating the winch were working in total darkness, often standing in waste and heat, powering the machine that delivered death to the surface. They were the engine of the show, invisible and expendable. You walk along the new service gantries, suspended above the maze. The smell has changed. It no longer smells of the aqueduct's fresh water. It smells of confinement. It smells of the zoo. The tunnels are lined with holding pens for lions, bears, ostriches, and deer. The green room of the Colosseum is a dungeon. But Domitian isn't just building cages. He is building a set design workshop. You see ramps designed to lift massive pieces of scenery, fake trees, rocks, entire hills into the arena. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The hegemony of the hunt. Why did Domitian stop the naval battles? Was it purely for the spectacle of the elevators? Some historians argue it was structural. They suggest that the repeated flooding and draining was damaging the foundations. The water pressure was cracking the travertine piers. Domitian, being a micromanager and a builder, he restored much of Rome, might have seen the structural fatigue and decided to save the building by drying it out permanently. Others argue it was financial. Flooding the arena required shutting it down for days to prepare. The elevators allowed for rapid-fire entertainment, beast hunt in the morning, executions at noon, gladiators in the evening. It was about throughput. The hypogeum allowed the Colosseum to operate like a factory, churning out violence with industrial efficiency. You look at the complex wooden floor being laid over the top of the maze. It is covered in sand. The lid is back on. The water is gone forever. You feel a pang of loss. The naval battles were chaotic, messy, and insanely ambitious. They represented a Rome that believed it could do anything, even move the ocean. The new system is impressive. Yes, it is precise. It is mechanical, but it feels colder. It feels calculated. The Colosseum has matured. It has traded the wild, unpredictable energy of the flood for the controlled, choreographed violence of the stage. You climb out of the hypogeum for the last time. The sun is setting over the arena. The sand is raked smooth, ready for tomorrow's lion hunt. The drains you saw earlier are now buried under tons of masonry, their mouths sealed, their purpose forgotten. You walk up the steps to the highest tier of the seating, the Menianum Summum. You look down at the oval. It looks small now. When it was filled with water, it looked like a vast sea. Now, broken up by the trapdoors and the fencing, it looks like a cage. But as you lean against the column, looking out over the city of Rome, a question nags at you. Did it really happen? Or was it all a dream? You saw the water. You saw the ships. But as the centuries grind on, and the memory of Titus fades, people will start to doubt. Future historians will look at the ruins of Domitian's walls and say, impossible. They couldn't have flooded this. The walls are in the way. They will forget that the walls came later. You are about to enter the realm of memory and myth. You are about to step out of the Colosseum and into the library of history, where the debate over the naumachiae rages harder than the battle itself. You are about to question your own eyes. Was the scale truly that grand? Or was it a water feature, blown out of proportion by poets paid to flatter the emperor? You turn to leave the arena. The cheers of the ghosts echo in your ears. You have seen the engineering marvel of the ancient world. You have seen the impossible made real. But now, you must deal with the legacy of that impossibility. You step out of the Flavian amphitheater, leaving the echo of the crowd and the smell of the drying sand behind you. You walk out into the streets of Rome, your mind reeling for what you have just witnessed. You saw water where there should be stone. You saw ships where there should be chariots. It was the greatest magic trick in the history of the world. But as you walk away, the image begins to blur. Decades pass. Centuries pass. The Colosseum falls into ruin. The marble is stripped away to build palaces for popes. The great bronze statues are melted down for cannons. And the memory of the naumachiae begins to fade into the realm of legend. You find yourself standing in a library, surrounded by dusty scrolls and skeptical historians. You are about to enter the great debate. The question that has plagued archaeologists for 2,000 years. Did it really happen like that? Or was the emperor just really good at marketing? You look at the text of Martial, the poet who witnessed the opening games. He is emphatic. He writes, "Whatever you see here, stranger ... was lately land." Do you not believe it? Watch while the waters fight. You will say, "Here was lately the sea." It seems clear. He is describing a transformation. But then you look at the ruins today. You look at the jagged, complex maze of walls in the exposed hypogeum. You think, how could you possibly flood that? This is a mainstream historical fact. For a long time, serious historians dismissed the idea of a Colosseum naval battle as a myth or a gross exaggeration. They looked at the underground maze and said, it's physically impossible. They argued that the writers were confusing the Colosseum with the naumachiae, Augustia's separate, permanent artificial lake across the Tiber. They suggested that Titus simply held the naval battle there and then, held the gladiator fights in the Colosseum, and the poets just blurred the two events together to make the emperor look better. It was the fake news theory of antiquity. But then, you remember the opus signinum. You remember the waterproof mortar you saw the workers applying. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, archaeologists went back into the drains. They found the hydraulic system. They proved that the hypogeum walls were a later addition by Domitian. This vindicated the poets. It meant that for a brief, shining window of time, perhaps only a few years, the Colosseum really was a convertible stadium. But even if the water was real, what about the ships? Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Some skeptics propose the miniature theory. They suggest that yes, there was water, but it was only knee-deep. And the ships weren't full-sized war galleys, but essentially theatrical props, small flat-bottomed punts decorated to look like triremes, crewed by maybe 10 men instead of 100. They argue that the naval battle was more like a violent puppet show or a splashing contest than a tactical engagement. It's a buzzkill theory, but it solves the space issue. Imagine 50,000 Romans cheering for a battle between two glorified canoes. It changes the vibe completely. However, Cassius Dio, writing later, insists that horses and bulls and other domesticated animals were in the water. That implies a scale and a stability that a canoe can't provide. You can't put a horse on a punt. You stand at the crossroads of evidence. On one side, you have the engineering proof, the drains, the cement, the aqueduct capacity. On the other side, you have the sheer logistical absurdity of it all. Historians still argue regarding the why. Why go to this much trouble? Why risk the structural integrity of the empire's greatest monument just to splash around for an afternoon? The answer lies in the Roman psyche. They didn't do it because it was efficient. They did it because it was hard. The difficulty was the point. By forcing the land to become water, the emperor was demonstrating that his power was limitless. It was a political statement written in fluid dynamics. You look back at the Colosseum in your mind's eye. Whether it was a fleet of massive triremes or a skirmish of river barges, the impact was the same. It convinced the world that Rome was the center of the universe. But the debate itself tells you something important. It tells you that the Romans achieved something so advanced, so audacious, that later civilizations literally forgot how they did it. We spent centuries thinking they were liars because we couldn't figure out the plumbing. You are about to close the book on the Colosseum. You have seen the water rise and fall. You have seen the ships smash and the crocodiles snap. You have questioned the reality and found the truth in the drains. Now, it is time to reflect on what this all means. It isn't just about boats. It is about the terrifying competence of a civilization that could move mountains and rivers just to entertain a bored crowd. It's about the legacy of the naumachiae. You are about to lay your head down, haunted by the sound of the water in the stone. You are about to realize that the greatest engineering feats aren't the ones that last forever, but the ones that vanish without a trace, leaving us wondering if they were ever there at all. And just like that, the roar of the Roman crowd fades into silence. The splash of the oars and the hiss of the crocodiles dissolve, replaced by the quiet, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The smell of saffron and stagnant water evaporates, leaving only the cool, clean air of your own room. You are back. You have returned from the Flavian amphitheater. You are safe in the present. Take a deep breath. Feel the solidity of the ground beneath you. There are no trapdoors here. There is no water rising to engulf the floor. You are on dry land, and you are safe. Let your mind drift away from the stone arches and the dark tunnels. Let the tension of the battle drain out of your muscles. You don't have to row. You don't have to fight. You don't have to worry about the Emperor's thumb. Think about the engineering marvel you just witnessed. The sheer ambition of it. It is a testament to what humans can do when they decide that impossible is just a suggestion. But now, that ambition can rest. The aqueducts are quiet. The sluice gates are closed. Sink deeper into your bed. Let the images of the ships and the waves soften into dreams. The spectacle is over. The arena is empty. The water has returned to the river, and the history books are closed. There is nothing left to do but sleep. The Emperor has left the box. The show is done. Rest now, brave spectator. The Colosseum sleeps, and so should you.